Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm going to be speaking with Janice Selbie. Janice is a psychologist.
No,
And,
just a
oh,
therapist.
sorry, a therapist. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But you were born and raised in a Pentecostal home, and a very strict Pentecostal home, and you left that faith like later on,
hmm
and then now you're working on it as a therapist, and you've got your website's divorcingreligion.com, and that's you have like workshops for people who've left faith, and it's dealing with the issues after having left faith.
Yes, exactly right. And
Well,
so,
thank you very much for
mhm,
coming on.
thank you.
So yeah, I mean, if you want to just basically start with that, and then we can go from there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Canadian, and I was raised in a smallish city in the Okanagan Valley, and my parents definitely were Pentecostal flavor. But I went on to become much more strict than my parents ever were. So we did have a TV in our home. We had quite a few rules about what we could watch and what we couldn't watch, what we could wear and how we were expected to behave and so forth. My siblings all eventually left the faith. They're older than I am. And I saw each time how much it hurt my own parents when my siblings rejected the faith. And I determined never to do that. I was the youngest child, the golden child. So I really worked hard at developing uh, a good relationship with God according to the rules of my church and my faith. Then I married a man who was destined for the pastorate. And it was while we were attending a very conservative Bible college in southern Alberta that I took that dive down the fundamentalist rabbit hole and started wearing a head covering, homeschooling the children, rejecting TV, rejecting the outside world, essentially. Did that for a number of years.
That's one thing because I'm just recently reading Megan Phelps Roper's book Unfollow. The first time I became aware of her was the first time she was on Sam Harris's podcast, and that was a couple of years now. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I've always found her story very fascinating. It's curious because when you mentioned like the no TV and all that, a lot of strict fundamental like Abrahamic faiths, like strict Islamic families, Orthodox Jewish families, strict
Right.
Christian families, obviously, they'll ban that kind
Mm-hmm.
of stuff, right? But yeah, in her house though, even though everyone talks about the West, and I'm not, this is not a defense of the Westboro Baptist Church,
Right.
but when you read the first chapter, she mentions how all that stuff was allowed. They could listen to whatever music they wanted. They could go to any movies they wanted. And the reason was that look at the evidence of the sin that these awful people are living in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as much as I don't, I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to praise the Westboro Baptist Church, but that idea there in and of itself, go look at the evidence and see how bad it is, right? I mean, you've been indoctrinated, you're thinking along a certain way and it's very rigid, but at least you're allowing that challenge. Where
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I find that that's so uncommon. Like everything else that I've been reading in that up to this point, I can recognize the strictness and how you have to adhere. But that one thing was just like I have to give that some measure of respect. Sorry, I didn't mean to digress into that, but it just struck
No,
me.
that's more along the lines of how my former husband thought. So the one who was a pastor,
Yeah.
I was much more about protecting the children by building all sorts of walls around them. I didn't feel that I didn't want them to be exposed to or influenced by what I consider to be satanic influences or just plain dangerous influences, is how I felt it. And his thinking was different. And this is, can be hard on a marriage when you both have differing views of how to carry something out. And he thought, why not? Why not expose them? Why not let them see, everything that's there? And I just really felt strongly that we needed to have some boundaries and some rules there.
Yeah. No, like I said, I just found that like it's
That
just
is interesting.
yeah, it was just everything else was super strict, but that one thing, you her grandfather was adamant on, and that's like I said, I give some measure of respect to that. Sorry, I didn't mean to, like I said, interrupt your,
Oh no,
like
that's
your.
okay. Her book. I'm hearing all about her book, and actually, Nate Phelps is going to be coming to our conference, and speaking at our conference in
Yeah.
April. So they're a very interesting family, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. No, that whole thing was quite interesting. So now, like after you left, I mean, not only you left your faith, but your marriage broke up, and then you were starting completely from scratch again. Now, is that what led you to working as a therapist, or like what did you like, or did you want to do that before you like you done the whole separation? Like, how did that progress?
Right. Yeah, I've always been a people person and just someone that people would seek out to talk to. Everywhere I went, didn't matter where I was. It's kind of like the bartender. People are just going to come up and lay their stuff on you. Um, and so uh, I already had that bent in my personality. And also, there's some. My father is a narcissist, and it made growing up difficult. It made for lots of rigidity. Narcissists are often drawn to fundamentalist religion, of course, because then they can have all the control. And so there were some mental health issues in my family that always intrigued me. And so when my marriage ended and my faith ended, it was kind of natural, it seemed, for me to be drawn to the counseling field. And it was very helpful for me because when you're studying to be a therapist, you have to make sure you're really dealing with your own stuff. You don't want to be projecting on your clients. So you have to be really aware of what your stuff is. And I found it cathartic and helpful and exhausting. And I think it's made me a better therapist.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're not doing well yourself, you can't help other people. Well, actually, I guess I shouldn't say that. You might help other people to the detriment of yourself. I mean, there's always that.
Yes. And we all have blind spots as
Yeah.
well. So I think that's also um, where it was helpful for me doing my schooling, really investigating what are my blind spots. And I do find this a lot um, in the say evangelical. If your listeners might be familiar with that idea, people who were evangelical Christians and now they've left, so they've kind of left that fundamentalist view behind. They may have left their fundamentalist religious views behind, but many of them haven't yet been able to leave fundamentalist thinking behind. So they remain quite rigid and black and white in their views. And this can really kind of play out in what we see or hear as cancel culture. The idea that if you don't exactly fall into line with their views, particularly on social media, they're going to wield social media like a club and try and cancel you, try and obliterate you. It's disturbing.
I want to just put a pin in that for a second.
Okay.
But because you'd mentioned in your bio like the Pentecostal and the evangelical, and then I mean I know at one point you said like Mentecostal because like you were influenced a bit by the Mennonites, but let's leave the Mennonites aside for a second because it's a little too small,
Sure.
yeah, a little too niche there.
Yeah.
Now, okay, I don't know very much about Pentecostalism. It's the speaking in tongues and stuff like that, but it's the evangelical thing that I've always been a little gray on in one aspect. Like you can go out and evangelize. Mormons technically go out and evangelize, right? They're spreading.
They do.
Yeah. Now, but like the brand of Christianity called evangelicalism, like the evangelical church, like because like there's evangelical Baptist, there's so like I like that separation of that. Like, so were you an evangelical Pentecostal or was that two separate churches? Like that's what I'm trying to figure out. I've always been a little confused about that.
Right. Yeah, it is confusing. In my understanding, all Pentecostal churches would be evangelical. They would all be interested in evangelizing or spreading the gospel.
Okay, so could I think of like evangelical as a subcategory of Protestant, and then underneath that you would have like Baptist and Pentecostal and I don't know how many other flavors. Could you sort
I
of think?
think that would be I think that would be an appropriate way to look at it. And it's not my specialty, understanding, those sorts of things. But I know that I've attended Baptist churches that have been evangelical. And to me also, well, of course, my background really is a lot of Pentecostal. So the services were very like exciting. So not only was the preacher exciting and dynamic and possibly yelling, but the music was very exciting and it was high emotion. But that's not the case in all
Yeah.
churches.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to think of like a general cover. I mean, we can go into the nuance of it, but yeah, let's not. I mean, unless you want to. Okay. The cancel culture thing.
Mm.
Just a bit of a background. I was working in war zones and disaster areas from 2002 to end of 2013. I got back to Canada in 2014. So I wasn't around for social media really, right? They didn't allow it on in war zones. The very, very limited access. I mean, it wasn't even around when I left.
Right.
So I had no idea what was going on. And I come back and the world's gone crazy.
Mm.
And the first thing I think to myself is, what's with all the blasphemy laws? Because that's basically what they were, right? You can't say this, you can't say that. Was it the stupidest things, right? And I'm like, oh my god! And then the world, everything's turned upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, so there was a really good article written in Aereo by James Lindsay, and he called it the postmodern faith of social justice. Now, if you take a look at critical race theory, and a lot of times when you hear anti-racism, it's critical race theory. It's like the Calvinist idea of total depravity. The whole system is racism. So everything is like the whole system is consumed by whiteness. So the system in and of itself is sinful, is racist. The system is the racism, right? You can't extricate it from. So it's like the total depravity idea. But at least in the Calvinism, through acts you can gain salvation. With the critical race theory, every act in and of itself is racist in one way or another, and even if it isn't, because the whole system is racist and the whole system is sinful, you yourself are consumed by sin no matter what you do, so there is no salvation by acts. So I've started reading this stuff in the last year and a half or so, and the more I read it, I'm like, okay, take as fundamentalist as a person you want, a religious person, right? Even if they don't give an ounce of it to anyone, but there is still the idea of redemption and grace and salvation. There is none in this, call it cancel culture, call it whatever you want. Social justice with a capital S, capital J, not like the movement of social justice, not actual social justice.
Yes.
There is nothing like that. There is no redemption. There is no salvation. There is no grace, and there is no heaven. It is very, very, very dogmatic, like you were saying. There's a conference that they're about to release the videos soon, and again, it was James Lindsay and Helen Plucklose, Peter Boghossian, and the guy who was filming their documentary, Mike Nana, and there was I believe one or two evangelical Christians with them, because this stuff is coming into the evangelical church, and I see James Lindsay post this stuff on Twitter, and it's belief in Christ is white supremacy because Christ was a Middle Easterner, not a white person, and like the the social justice is getting into the evangelical church in like certain parts of like the Baptist churches in the south of the States. I mean, okay, I look at it, I'm reading it, I look at it, coming from a, okay, and I didn't really have a strict background, but like the tradition was, and it's exactly what it is. I mean, I don't see how more people. Maybe you have to come from that strict background to realize what it is. I don't know.
feel sometimes too that there is somewhat of an age dynamic there too. So I'm almost 50, and most of my life was lived without social media, even without internet, really, but certainly without Twitter and Facebook. And the many of the folks, most of the folks that I've come across really wielding that club, the social warrior or social justice club, they're quite a bit younger. Like lots of them are in their 20s and 30s. And I don't know if you've ever noticed that. I just find the older people uh, tend to take a step back from it.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I find it's more okay. I think there's a crossover from younger millennials and older Gen Zs. Okay, and I think it's because the oldest millennial right now is having college age kids, so 41, 42. That's technically the oldest millennial. The youngest ones are like, I guess, late 20s type of thing.
Okay.
Maybe 30. I don't know. Like, I'd have to look at the exact dates, but so that's why I'm saying it's probably people who are like 35 to 25. This is just, I'm just giving you an anecdotal thing here that I heard someone else talking about, because I don't know a lot of Gen Zs. Okay. Myself, like I just turned 50, right? So,
Yay! How is it? Tell me it's great.
whatever. I felt absolutely no different. I'm still the same old crank I was when I was 49. So,
Phew.
but yeah. So, but it was actually again someone on social media, but she was on Joe Rogan, Bridget Fetisi, and she was saying all the Gen Zs that she knows, because she's from a large family and these are all her nieces and nephews,
Okay.
they are using triggered as in, like just like take the term triggered. They're using it just like as jokingly, like, someone who's seriously using the word triggered, like, oh my God, you triggered me, this and that. And it could be over the most minor thing, right?
Yes.
But the younger Gen Z, so let's say the 18 and younger type of thing, are using it more like, oh my God, she was triggered, it was so funny, but like it was just like, oh, she made an ass of herself, she was freaking out, like
Right.
stuff we'd say in the 80s when whatever, I'm gonna get canceled for this, oh my God, she was spazzing out or something,
Right.
like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, I've just triggered
So
someone.
that's where they're using it. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what, so it's, I think with the common, as you become, okay, we're just getting totally off topic here, but whatever. As you're getting on to, when the printing press first came out, oh my God, people are going to become dumber. They're not going to, remember stuff. Oh, you can spread lies. You can spread all this. And then Milton wrote Areopagitica. Then, I'm not saying that was the final straw at it, but the rules of, or the arguments for free speech with the advent of the printing press and such easy access to information. Like you said, yeah, I didn't grow up with the internet. Neither of us did. A lot of millennials didn't either. It's Gen Z that grew up with social media, and even Gen Z, it's only the younger ones that have been in social media their whole lives, right?
Right.
The older ones haven't.
Right.
Unless you want to count, Friendster or something like that. But yeah, so they're figuring out the rules themselves because no one's told them. Like there are no rules yet, right? And so just as when the printing press came out and stuff, and then by the time the U.S. Constitution came around, I'm going to use that as the time difference. Arguments for free speech had been made. So those things were able to be formed. So it took a lot longer because it was harder to spread the information. But now I think the usage of it is, it's everywhere. Everyone's using it, or more or less. And so we're coming up with how to do this. And I think that younger, like I said, the Gen Z generation, they're the ones who are really going to figure this stuff out to some extent. But we can't stifle anything. Like, okay, if they come up with a thing that's saying, okay, you know what, we can't have completely free speech. There's a thing right now, it was like something like 60% of the U.S. Said that they would want limits on speech and punishment for hate speech, which I think is absolutely insane, but whatever. That's the way it's set up, right? So if if that's the way they're going to do it, but up until the point that like we can't make that decision now and then try to roll it back. I think, yeah, let's have this conversation. Like, like I said, I brought up the book Areopagitica, which again is one of the best defenses for free speech, but it was written specifically about the printing press. Maybe we need an Areopagitica 2.0 for the rules of free expression and any limits thereof on an open forum like the internet, where again, information is so easy to get out. Sorry, I rambled for a bit there.
That I think that is a book that you should start writing immediately.
Oh, good Lord, no! I'm no way qualified for that.
It's true. The things that you're saying, we're living in interesting times, and technology does evolve faster than ethics, it seems. And so the young people then who are kind of in this Wild West that you're describing, their landscape looks much different from the landscape you and I grew up in. There almost is no nuclear family anymore, the way that it used to be. How we used to picture families when I was growing up in the 70s, a mom, a dad, and 2 or 3 kids and a dog, that sort of thing. Things have changed, and even people are so much more invested and involved in social media and with cell phones, texting all the time. I do worry about children sometimes not having the same attention from their parents as people our age had. Yeah, it is different, and you're right. They're trying to navigate it, and I feel like this is the way humans go. This is the way I go. I go all the way to the right, and I go all the way to the left, and I'm constantly searching for that elusive middle ground. Sometimes I land on it. It's very exciting for me, but lots of times I have a hard time finding it.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious about this. Like, do you, like, when you're working with people, let's say it's someone who's older, and they aren't on social media as much, and someone who's younger is on it a lot. Do you notice a difference in how they deal and how they cope? Like, or is, like, I'm just wondering if it's ever anything like that's ever come up for you, or if it's, it must make some difference. I don't know.
Well, I would say loneliness is common in every generation, and so the elderly are quite lonely, and youth can also be quite lonely and feel really isolated. There definitely is a difference. Some things I think are really very good about millennials and the younger generation. Like they're seeking after knowledge, and they have more knowledge available right at their fingertips than we've ever had before as a human race. And there does seem to be a lot of caring about other people. Even the whole idea of the social justice mentality, there's great beauty in that, in caring about other people on this planet. But when we can twist things and take things so far that common sense has gone out the window, and that doesn't do people any good either. And they're just not sure, well, am I even allowed to think this? Am I allowed to have this thought? And the thought policing comes in, and that's very much a part of fundamentalism. It certainly was a part of my growing up, where we would even have accountability groups. And so if you'd had a lustful thought, or a person had looked at porn or anything like that, boy, you better share that in your accountability group. And that's not healthy, to not be allowed to think your own thoughts. We all have to have the privacy to think our own thoughts and figure things out.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's just it. Like, that's, I don't know. It's, again, okay, this social media thing, because it comes up a lot, and it's, okay, like, let's take a group like Footsteps. I don't know. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Right. In New York?
Yeah, in New York City now. Mm-hmm. They have a social media presence. There's ex-Muslims in North America. I'm sure I don't know of, ex-evangelical groups, but I see, like, on Twitter hashtags and stuff like that. So I know there's groups. Mm-hmm. And these things are great and they're helpful and it's awesome. So social media, like I'm not suggesting anyone would say, okay, don't use social media or only use social media, but it's like, too much of it. And like I see it a lot with new ex-Muslims. And I'm not disparaging anyone here, but sometimes I snicker a little bit just because it reminds me of when I see converts. And they're so zealous. They're so zealous. But I see like new ex-Muslims. It's just like, oh my God, I have to defend this, and it's great. Okay, get out there. You're getting a lot of frustration out. But it's like, okay, then they start getting hit with a lot of attacks and everything. I don't think they were expecting that, right?
Right.
It's in Christianity and it's also in Islam. I mean, Christianity, you probably heard it in like the fundamentalist things. Just give me a second. I'm going to pick it up here. I have it written down. Narrow is the way which leadeth into the life. And then in Islam, you have a thing called the Sirat al-Mustaqim, which is the straight path or the narrow path. And that's the path that you have to walk to get to heaven. If you stray off that, that's it. But on all sides, like, yea, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but I'm beset on all sides by, wickedness. And like, it's that idea.
You're triggering me.
Yeah. But,
sorry.
But I mean, I joke that like, okay, and I get it, and I'm not trying to, like play this game of oppression, but you can criticize evangelicalism and you'll mainly only get criticism from evangelicals, right? You won't get it from mainstream media, whatever. But an ex-Muslim criticizing Islam, it's like they have to walk now. They left an Islamic Sirat al-Mustaqim. Now they have to walk a woke one, a red-pilled one, a conservative. Like it's crazy. It's just like you said. Okay, can I say this? Can I not say this? You're young, and like now you say something on Twitter, and you might not get a job anymore, and you got to worry about that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of things I'm wondering if that's like that's got to have an effect on you if you've already left something so fundamental. You're trying to find your way now, and you're being forced into something else. You're trying to be pigeonholed into something else fundamental. I mean, that's got to affect people.
Yes, and I have not only tremendous respect, but very genuine concern for people who are brave enough to choose their own path away from Islam, because the price can be dire. Like, I mean, when we leave Christianity, it is painful and we lose community and it's really awful. But I don't fear for my life. And I know some people, when they've left being a Muslim, the price that they pay can be their life. So I feel like that is really significant. And we have to be able to think for ourselves. And while it can be helpful to share as we're grieving, because you do grieve when you lose your faith, if it's been such a big part of your life. And so the temptation is to overshare and blurt it out and tell everybody. Not everybody is safe to share your journey with. People are in different mental spaces, different emotional spaces. So, caution sometimes is an appropriate word to use.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's not like I give advice or anything, but the few times people have asked me, and it's just like, it's like the first thing I always say is, your own situation. Like, I can never judge for you the danger you might put yourself in. So I said, you're gonna have to judge for that first. But I always said it's, I never looked at it as losing faith. I looked at it as gaining a better perspective or a fresher perspective.
I love it.
I'm like, okay, I've gained something. I haven't lost anything, right? And then, but I also tell them that it's, like, okay, especially if you're living a double life. I said, you feel so much better. Yes, it might be hard at start and it might be difficult. But whatever, long is the way and hard is the path out of hell. But like but it's worth it in the end, because I don't know. I mean, like that gets too much for me. Like like having to do that just was that was, I couldn't, and that I found that so tough.
Well, can you tell me if there is a big difference, like in Christianity, and particularly evangelicalism, you are very much encouraged to develop a personal relationship with Jesus as your Lord and Savior. I mean, he's to be the master of your life. You pray to him and you really believe that you are talking to a person, the person of Jesus Christ. And so that's where much of our loss comes in. When we do walk away from that, it's like waking up from something that actually wasn't real in the first place. Is it similar in Islam? Are you encouraged to have a personal relationship with Allah?
Well, no, because Allah is not a person, right?
Okay. Okay.
It's, the unknown, the unseeable, right? It's the unknowable. So like before Jesus, so I mean like the Old Testament Yahweh,
Hmm.
that's Allah, right?
Okay.
So
Yes.
you worship him, you glorify him, respect him, obey him, you
Mm.
know, whatever, like if you want to go to the Marvel movies, the All Father, right? Like,
Right.
but so it's more of, because it is so close knit. Everything is so close knit, right? It's everything's about the community. Everything's all revolves around that, and it's. I mean, again, it depends on how strict everyone is, and even in the strict ones, they'll adhere to some things, but they might not have heard of something else, or someone living in Saudi and someone living in Bangladesh, but they're both very very strict families, but they've picked up something of the Bangladeshi culture, so
Right.
that's not allowed here, but it has no impact in Saudi Arabia, so that wouldn't even be a like. But
Right.
but there's like like I'll give you an example. You're supposed to walk into your house and every room of your house with your right foot first, except for the washroom. You walk in with your left foot first because the left is the things that are dirty. And now it's a very
Wow.
very idiosyncratic OCD thing to do, right? But it's there, and it's so. I mean, it can control it down to that little level,
Hmm.
right? But
Hmm.
it's what you're giving up is, well, no longer have control. You no longer have, or not a control. You no longer have answers. Everything you were told is not true. You gave up a chunk of your life
Hmm. Yes. So
in
those parts are the same.
yeah
Those parts are
yeah.
similar.
But there is no. I mean, I'm sure there are people who think they have a very personal and special relationship. Like I can, like my sample size is very small in this. Like, no, but like I said, it's, but it's like I've never heard anyone express that exact feeling. Like I have a very personal, but like they take it very personally, and they take it like my mom is very very devout and she prays. But I mean, but she's not fundamentalist, and she doesn't wear the hijab. I've never seen my mom wear the hijab in her life.
Oh,
Only when she prays does
interesting.
she cover her hair.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's not like I said, but I've never heard her use that expression, and I've never heard anyone use that expression. Like I know what you mean. Like, oh, I have a personal, like,
Right.
or even like finding Jesus or putting Jesus in
Right.
your life, right? Like I never heard it put that way. That's
Yeah,
interesting. I've never thought about that.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will say one thing that all humans seem to have in common, regardless of our background, is that we have a strong dislike for ambiguity. And so rules feel quite safe to us to some degree. And when we are children and we don't have an understanding of how things work, obedience is terribly important. Our lives can depend on it. Um, but then some of us, so as I mentioned, I grew up in a home with a narcissist, emotionally volatile father. And following rules was very important in our house because it could prevent you from being punished, right? And sometimes, yeah, what being with emotionally volatile people can be a dangerous situation to be in. And that's where my real love of rules developed. I felt very safe with rules. If I could know and understand the rules, I could follow them and avoid punishment. And so I really gravitated very much towards rules. And I feel bad for my children because certainly our home was quite rule oriented until I deconverted and all hell broke loose. But yeah, everybody seems to have that bit in common. We don't really like ambiguity. Now, of course, I see the world in varying shades of gray and every other color.
Yeah, I mean, but that's one thing I've like with the rules and all that. It's just, and you mentioned before, like people will not, they maybe have left that flavor of fundamentalism, but then they're fundamentalist about something else, right?
Yeah, still quite rigid.
Yeah, and it's just it's that rigidity that I think, like, it's that rigidity that you need to get rid of, and that's why sometimes I have an issue with some of the, okay, like Dawkins. I'll give him as a prime example. Very much, this is not a slight against him or anything like that, but it's that strident thing, right? Okay, the way Dennett says, you want to break the spell. So yes, fine, you can disprove all of that, but once you've disproved it, you haven't gotten rid of the thought pattern that made it possible for them to believe it. So then you're just leaving them prey to something else, right? Maybe it'll be something as benign as the law of attraction, which, I mean, maybe it's not so benign, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
but or crystals or something,
Yes.
and it's, and some people might say, okay, the law of attraction isn't really, rigid, but I've seen some of their videos where they said, if people in your life don't believe in this, cut them out of your life. And that's very cult-like.
Yes. And there can be a lot of blaming too about if you get sick.
Yeah.
And you've allowed sickness, you brought that sickness on yourself.
Yeah, or you didn't, put the correct wishes out into the universe. I think they call it like, you put it out in the vortex or something stupid like that. Yeah, but so that's what I mean. Like, I respect Dawkins, and I respect the idea of, okay, prove that, yes, you can prove that, this, like, that's something out of the Quran, that the sperm is formed between the ribs and the backbone. Yes, scientifically you can prove that that's false. But by proving it false, have you really shown the person how to think? Like, that's where I have some issue with some of the more, strident, just break the spell and that's it. Then they'll be on their own and they can figure it out. It's like,
it's only half the story.
Yeah.
And I feel like as humans, in a way, we're hardwired for laziness. Where, evolutionarily, we want to get from A to B in the most efficient manner possible. And so actually having to learn critical thinking skills it takes effort. It requires energy.
Yeah.
And when you're used to just sitting there and being fed everything by your minister or your imam or whatever the deal is, and you have all the rules there, and okay, I can think this, but I can't think that. So you're almost kept in an infantile state. And really, maturity is when we're able to release the rigidity and the black and white thinking and be able to measure and weigh things and say, you know what, some of this might make sense, some of it doesn't make sense. I'm going to explore, I'm going to research and investigate, rather than just have a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, you said that, so that makes you a racist. Things are nuanced and complex, but we want simple answers. That's just the way we are.
Yeah. And okay, I've been playing around with this idea for a little bit, and I've given the example to a couple of people, and I said, okay, and I've said this 100 times or 1,000 times or whatever, free speech is the foundation that we built all our other rights off of, right? Or the free speech is the foundation for where we get all our other rights. And I don't disagree with that, except for the foundation part. For the last maybe couple of years, I'm thinking, it's not a foundation. A foundation is firm and rigid, and you have to build a structure around it. And once that structure is built, like you build your house on your foundation, you'll forget about your foundation until it cracks. You won't think once about it, right? You'll think about your walls and the framing and the gyprock. You'll think about all that. You'll forget the foundation because who cares? And that's fundamentalism. That's that side of the thinking. I said, okay, if you want to think of a free and open society, I said, think of it like a garden. The earth is there. It's strong enough to support, an orchard's a garden, right? So it'll support a tree.
Mhm.
You add the nutrients to it. You take care of it. It's very easy to adjust and it's very easy to lose. But you have to constantly look after it. You're always aware of where everything that you have comes from if you think of it as a garden and not as a foundation. There's a really good book by David Deutsch called The Beginning of Infinity, and he talks about how we gain knowledge, and he talks about dynamic thinking and static thinking.
Mm-hmm.
The Enlightenment is dynamic thinking. Fundamentalist faith is static thinking.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I think, as people, again, like take someone like a Dawkins, if he added a little bit on, I mean, he talks about free expression, he talks about the scientific method, and he tells you what it is, but he doesn't really go past that. Like, it's a very, very, very surface level. Like, it's just a thin veneer of everything that's underneath it.
Mm.
And I mean, if you want to get
first step,
yeah, it's a first step. But if you want to get people out of, religion, or if you want to get people out of dogma, right? Just don't shatter it and give them, okay, well, then you need to think critically, and this is the scientific method where you come up with an idea, you test it, and then you prove it, and that's how you should do everything, and then just walk away. Because, like I said, if you give them at least an idea of, okay, look for this kind of thinking that's it moves, and then, okay, you know what, I have, like, go back to the garden thing. Okay, I'm using this kind of fertilizer. I'm using this, and this. If I add this to it, will it make it better or will it hurt it? I can put it in one little area and not damage everything else, but you can't do that with a foundation, right? Mm-hmm. You have to. So I've been like, we're just trying to, like, it was just me playing thought games, and like I said, speaking with a few people about it, like trying to get them to say, okay, just change the way you think about the base for which you build everything else on. Because if your base is rigid and firm and it's not going to change, what good is it?
I like your garden metaphor. I think it's quite beautiful.
All I have to do is add in mustard seed.
No, anything like that. One of the things that I've done since I divorced religion is I developed the Divorcing Religion workshop. And the very last module of that workshop is called Mind Control. Don't let an old flame burn you twice. And in that module, we look at some of the things that represent fundamentalist thinking or fanatical thinking, and the different steps that it took us to get there, like the different levels of attachment, kind of, right, till you're to the point where something totally has gripped you instead of it was once just an interesting idea to you. And that module is specifically in there to try and help people navigate as they move forward without religion so that they don't fall back into fundamentalist thinking. Because you're right, it's not just enough to say, well, that's baloney. You have to help people along the way. And my job as a therapist, I am definitely not interested in robbing anyone of their faith or taking people out of a church, anything like that. The way that I see my role is I'm there catching people. I'm a net underneath. When those church doors open and the people find themselves somehow on the other side of their faith that had once been dear to them, I'm there to catch them and say, you're not alone. There are other people who've come through this, who have lost what was a very cherished faith and worldview. And let's walk through this together.
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought up your workshop because I wanted to talk to you about that. So how long have you been doing this?
Well, I started my own counseling practice in 2016, I think, maybe the end of 2015. And then it took me a couple of years really to firmly determine my niche, which for me is working with people who have religious trauma syndrome, say. And that came about by, of course, my own experience, but then coming across Dr. Marlene Winnell. I don't know if you've heard of her. She wrote
Actually,
a wonderful
yeah,
book.
I spoke with her a couple of years back.
Oh, terrific.
And,
Yeah. So her book is Leaving the Fold. And she's the one that coined the phrase religious trauma syndrome. Should I explain that for your
sure,
listeners?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So according to Dr. Winnell, religious trauma syndrome is a function of both the chronic abuses of harmful religion and the impact of severing one's connection with faith and the faith community. So I look at it as there were lots of things I had to give up or that I shut myself off to in order to be in my tight fundamentalist group. And then when I left that group, I had other losses that I had to contend with on the other side. So it's quite a big, and it's a real shock to the system to suddenly discover, oh my God, everything I based my life on, everything is not true. It's not what I thought it was. And then you're left with thinking, can I even trust myself ever again? What if there are other things that I think are true and they are not true? And it's exhausting. And you go through a real time of grieving, but it's grief that's not recognized by the world at large. If people have never been religious, they don't really have any understanding of it. They just think of, so what? You don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. But when your life has been based on it, and also if it's cultural for you, if it's the country that you come from and the culture that you come from, this is the belief that everyone must have. There's a lot that you can lose with that. So I'm there to help people explore those losses, the reaction to those losses, but also what life can look like going forward, because you're entering a time of tremendous potential as you're waking up to the possibility of life beyond religion.
Yeah, I mean, okay, and one of the things I find is, and again, like I said, small number of people I speak with, it's just, people get angry, and then they're worried about the fact that they're angry. I'm like, you know what? Okay, look, anger, regret, sadness, fine. You can say they're like people, although those are their negative emotions. I'm like, it's how you react to them that's going to make them negative or positive, right? Mm-hmm. You can take that anger and that regret and do something good with it. So if you are angry and you're regretful, you're angry at the fact that you were never allowed to travel because of the faith you were brought up in, right. And you regret everything that you missed doing as a teenager or up until your mid-20s, and you're like 50 now. Well, hell, go travel.
Mm-hmm.
Like use that anger to
to fuel change.
Yeah, or to push yourself to, okay, I need to save like $5,000 and I'm going to go on this trip and then whatever. Like, yes, okay, you can regret not doing it and you can wallow in it, or you can say, you know what, I missed out on all this stuff. I'm going to take advantage of what time I've got now and go do it. I mean, like that's and especially if you're young, like yes. I wanted to sing and I was never allowed to sing. Okay, fine, go sing, go take singing lessons. Mm-hmm. Even if you suck, who cares? Go do it. Like, go stand on the top of a bridge and belt your heart out.
Preach, man, preach. Yeah.
No, but I mean, like I don't know. Like I find some, and again, I'm not I never to tell I never put myself out as a therapist. I'm not like a person to give out. I'm not come to me for advice or anything. But if I've ever asked, I was just like always like, don't get angry. If you're angry, be angry, but like do something with it. Like don't just.
I think that a lot of people get tripped up on anger, particularly if they've come out of a background that has taught them that anger is wrong and anger is simple and you're not allowed to be angry. That can really cause trouble for people then when they've left that belief system and they're feeling the weight of this tremendous anger. Maybe they've spent $50,000 on an education at a seminary, at some religious school. Maybe they were even a pastor. Now they don't believe, they don't have a job and they don't have a way to support their family. Anger is a legitimate part of grief. It really is, but we don't want to get stuck there. So we can acknowledge it and use it as fuel to build our new life.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like again, just little things I've seen. I'm just curious. Do you notice? Because I used to host a podcast with two ex-Muslims from Australia, and then just the logistics got far too complicated.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
but uh, but we focused on. So we spoke with like ex-Mormons. Actually, Jen was really very very unique because she was ex-Mormon, but she had a side of her family that were Syrian Muslims, and so
Wow.
she would spend summers with them. So she got kind of brought up in both faiths. But
Fascinating.
she was Mormon, and then when she grew up, and as she was like in her late teens, she married a fundamentalist Muslim, and she became a very fundamentalist Muslim and moved to
Well,
Pakistan. And then now
yeah.
she's I call her like I tell her she's an ex Eminem because she's an ex Muslim and ex Mormon.
I love it.
But yeah, so sorry, I really get off. So yeah, that's we spoke with like ex Jehovah's Witnesses, a couple of ex evangelicals and stuff, and it was just to point out the similarities.
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, obviously the doctrines are the same, but the shunning was, okay, everyone, okay, the idea of being shunned, cut off from your family, like Mormons had, whatchamacallit, called blood atonement, where they would actually kill apostates, and I think Jen said that went on until about the 30s.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a lot of similarities and stuff. I mean, it's like what are the commonalities you see when you speak to people coming from different, like, faith traditions and stuff? I mean, even in Christianity, there'd be slight differences, I think.
That example you just gave of that lady who went from Mormonism to Islam it's interesting, and I don't actually think it's all that uncommon because they kind of they hate each other with the hatred of brothers, right? It's a familiar thing, fundamentalism, those harsh rules. Give me those rules. So my rules were different in this faith, but they were equally strong and strident as they are in this other faith over here. So you're switching camps, but you're still in that fundamentalist
Actually,
mindset.
in the Mormon Islam thing, okay, at least this is coming from Jen, and so that's my background on that. But she said Joseph Smith admired Muhammad, and the four wives thing, the polygamy in Mormonism. There was a lot of stuff that they admired in in the Islamic faith in and of itself, even if it's okay, it's not the true faith, but certain aspects of it they liked. So it was, for her, it was a lot of similarity. So like, going from a Mormon household, covering up and dressing like that, a lot of a lot of segregation, going to
Yes.
a Muslim household and having
Mm.
the same thing, so she could see a closeness in a relationship in that as well. But
Yes.
but like I said, she did it because she wanted to marry someone, and like she converted before she married the person. Sorry, I shouldn't say that.
Right.
She met the guy, I think, a year or two after she converted. So,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah. The loss of relationships and community is probably the strongest theme that I see echoing through all the various backgrounds of my clients, coming from diverse fundamentalist backgrounds. So, speaking for evangelicalism or Christianity, church is your one-stop shop. You go there, you have your emotional needs met, your spiritual needs met, your psychological needs met. People are looking after your children. If something goes wrong, if you lose your job, people are helping you financially. Like, you feel that it's truly a community. They really have your back until they don't. Until you ask a question, the wrong question, or you start thinking the wrong thing. So then to find yourself on the outside of that community, no longer welcome, it's a very daunting situation to look at having to rebuild your life, because your life now is going to look more like a patchwork quilt. You have to develop new communities in all these different areas. And again, it requires work. It is hard work, and there's no way around it. There's no shortcut. So it's a lot to grapple with and to deal with, and it can take years. So that's why it's important to have interactions with other people who can relate to where you're coming from.
okay, you're in Kelowna right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I lived in Vancouver for 5 years, and this is going back a while now. So '86, I did. There was a thing called Exchange Canada, and it was a high school student exchange thing. So I spent 6 weeks in Summerland, actually.
Oh, That's so funny.
So yeah, so I mean, I know the area a little bit, but I've lived in a small town. I'm in Montreal now, but from 2014 to 2018, I was in northern Quebec in a remote little Inuit community.
Wow.
So the church in the small town, right? Or let's say you're in New York City and you're in a Hasidic Jewish community. You're in the middle of one of the biggest cities in the world, but you're isolated.
Yes.
So like growing up in a small town where the church is that, right? Like it is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're growing up like I said, Hasidic Jew, or even very very strict Muslim or something in a very enclosed city community in a large city. Like I said, I mean, you're doing business only with your kind. You don't know where to go buy meat because the halal meat shop or the kosher meat shop in your neighborhood won't sell to you anymore.
Right.
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 You don't know where to. I mean, not that halal or kosher should matter at that point, but it's what you knew. So it's
yes.
And then I can see that in a small town as well. It's everything. And then in a small town, everyone knows everything. I mean, you have to pick up and leave, I guess, at one point, depending on how bad it is. So
right.
Do you notice like differences between where people come from and where they were living when they left? Or is that like, sorry, I mean, this might be like a leading question because I gave a big intro to it, but.
A lot of people, I think, do end up having to leave if they're in a smaller community and they now find themselves thinking in a larger way. It's very tough if your entire community is entrenched in a specific mindset. So larger city centers can seem a lot more appealing. Then you have a way better chance of being able to find a community, build your own communities that you'll fit with better. And it's so hard if you're married and you deconvert or deconstruct and your spouse remains a believer, and then you add children into that mix. It is intensely painful for both parties. It's confusing. It's very difficult. There are many people who feel that it's just easier to stay silent, to keep going through the motions, keep going to the church, keep, singing the songs, all this stuff, even though they haven't believed it. And there are certainly ministers, like the Clergy Project, right, set up for people who exactly have found themselves in that position. And I'm so glad the Clergy Project exists so that these people can at least have someone to talk to who understands. And it's not the same for everybody. And there's not necessarily a right way to deconvert. How it happened for me was I had a series of tragedies befall my family in a very short amount of time, and the pain of that shook me free from my cognitive dissonance, and I finally stuck my head up out of the ground and thought, something is not right here. I've tried so hard to be the best possible Christian and follow all the rules, dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And I'm just stuck in this shitstorm here, pretty much. And so that at that point, that made me think, I've bet on the wrong horse. Something isn't right about this situation. And then I allowed myself to start exploring outside.
Yeah. I mean, okay, like something you mentioned in there, am I being the right kind of X, whatever, right?
Right.
I don't know if you've ever come across the term takfir.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so takfir is how to be a good Muslim. So they'll have takfir on, like it's just interpretation. Like there's a couple of different things, but takfir is like, so there's a group called tablighis, which you can kind of think of them like as evangelicals, but one of the things they do is they go to Muslim households and tell them people how to be the proper type of Muslim. Right?
Yes, that happens in Judaism as well.
Okay, so that's what takfir is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glossing this over very, very hugely here, but then I notice it in with ex-Muslims, and there's like this ex-Muslim takfir, like you're not ex-Muslim incorrectly. I'm like, what?
Yes.
I'm like, yes. No. What do you mean?
That's that whole fundamentalist mindset again.
I'm like, no.
You're doing it wrong.
Yeah, and like some of them, why don't you want to have a drink? You have to have a drink. I'm like, don't have to do anything. I left that because I didn't want to be told what I have to and don't have to
Uh-huh.
do. You know, like,
Yeah,
okay, and that's a very silly, stupid example, obviously, right? But it's still, I mean, it's like, you get that, like, oh, why are you speaking to that person? You're not, you know, and that's again part of that, like, cancel culture type of thing, but it's,
yes,
you know, why are you speaking to that person? You know, you shouldn't because you're going to hurt this cause or that cause, or you're going to hurt.
right,
It's like I said, I left because I didn't want any of that. Right.
exactly.
So, you know, and if you were opposed to that, then why are you trying to enforce it now? And it's just,
Right.
like I said, it's, you know, I again, it's, you know, we're I think going to be beating the dead horse here, but that like I said, leaving that mindset, like I,
And that's something that comes up in my workshop because people are in various states of deconversion. Like some people, by the time they take my workshop, they're an atheist. They're a pretty hardcore atheist. Some people agnostic. You know, some people they're kind of feeling around in New Age, and I get it because when I left Christianity, I took up crystals, grew my dreadlocks, you know, got my tattoos, all these kinds of things, like so cliche. But it was all part of me. It was all part of my journey in getting to the place where I am now. So in the workshop, and I have people who were formerly Catholic, formerly Orthodox Jewish, former evangelicals. There's all sorts of groups, and they come to terms because we meet each other face to face on online once a week, and we're each sharing our journey and where we're at now and where we've come from. And so it's also about listening, you know, with compassion. You might be thinking, wow, you're putting your faith in crystals. That's hooey. But there's a way that we can ask questions respectfully and also to listen respectfully and just see that's where they are on their journey right now. They probably won't stay there. I mean, our goal is to keep evolving and growing in this life. Yeah, but to insist that people, yeah, you have to have a drink now. No, they really don't.
yeah. Okay, there's one thing I was wanting to really, like I said, I don't never really kind of said it, but I wanted to ask you about this meaning, right? So, faith is a meaning making exercise. It's something, you know, it gives my life meaning,
Right.
and that's one thing. Like, okay, once you leave, okay, I have to find the meaning for my life,
Hmm.
and I'm like, okay, you know, let's go back to the Carl Sagan thing. Like, you know, if you want your life to have some cosmic purpose, find yourself a worthy goal, right? Like your life, a life well lived is its own meaning, right? Like, I mean, if you grow up small town, wherever, I don't care, you know, yeah, you live an average life, go on a couple of vacations a year, raise a family and some kids, don't do anything earth shattering. But that in itself is its own meaning. Like, I find that's a one, oh, that gave me meaning, that gave my life meaning. I have to find that meaning again. It's like, no, I don't think, like, I think that external locus to find meaning is one of the biggest problems and like one of the biggest hurdles. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if I'm making too
Hmm.
much of it or whatever.
Hmm. I think it can be a big trap and a lot of pressure. And the fact of the matter is, it's extremely individual. Like
Yeah.
you said, to some people, just raising a family, that is what gives them meaning. And then they have to adjust once their children grow up and leave home, and then they're just kind of waiting for grandkids, and then they can speak into the lives of their grandchildren. But things don't always turn out that way, and we have to have a degree of flexibility to be able to roll with the changes, to recover when things don't go our way. Um, my the way that I give meaning to my life right now, at this stage in my life, is by helping other people. And so I draw on the background that I've come from, and that allows me to be there for other people. I don't know 10 years from now what will be meaningful to me, other than I do love my children. I love life. I love learning and living and growing. And that's just such a broader way to look at it than to have one meaning or purpose.
Yeah, and that's just what that's what I mean. Like I never understood that. I mean, I don't think I ever really understood that at all. Like, oh, you have to have the meaning. You have to find a meaning for your life. I'm like, it's a little narrow. I mean, it's
Yeah, yeah, and I've heard it said that the meaning of life is to give life meaning, and
yeah,
that is so individual,
yeah,
open to interpretation for
yeah,
everybody.
yeah. It's just, but yeah. It's a like I said, it gets a little nutty. I don't want to keep. I don't want to keep you too long here. I know you've got that conference coming up and everything, but if there's stuff you want to talk about, or if you've got things going on, or anything you want to talk about, feel free, please.
Okay, I would like to talk just a little bit about the conference. I'm pretty excited about it. It's you may have run into it online, Court 2020, the Conference on Religious Trauma, and it's being held in 2020. That's why the hashtag is Court 2020. It's being held in Vancouver, BC, and this is the inaugural event. It's the first of its kind, a conference focusing on religious trauma. And we have experts in the field, including Dr. Marlene Winnell. She's one of our keynote speakers. Dr. Daryl Ray, the founder of Recovering from Religion and the Secular Therapy Project. And actually, I'm quite excited to say that the Secular Therapy Project has agreed to become a sponsor of the conference on religious trauma. And I'm just very tickled about that. Who else do we have coming? Dr. Valerie Tarico and Dr. Yanya Lalich. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Lalich.
Nope.
She is fascinating. She's a cult specialist in the United States. And I believe the FBI actually consults with her when they have group situations like Waco. Remember that happened in Waco, Texas, all those years ago. She's extremely knowledgeable. And so she doesn't approach it so much from the religion idea as from the self-sealing group or high control groups. And she looks at what makes those tick. So she's our cult expert. And Janet Heimlich will also be joining us. And she's an expert on religious child maltreatment. So we'll be looking at childhood indoctrination. So those are our keynote speakers. I hope I've got everybody in there. And then we also are having people doing workshops and featured speakers like Yasmin Mohammed. I'm quite excited to have her coming and sharing with us. And Nate Phelps, David Smalley. We just have so many people who have knowledge to share. And we'll also have workshops for therapists. We want therapists to attend and learn about religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome. And we also want people who are in recovery from religious trauma to attend. We'll have lots of therapists there, people able to help out, and we'll have some sharing circles and healing circles. I think it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be really good.
Okay. Anyways, I just have one kind of little, I don't even want to say bone to pick with, but so the conference is April 24th, 25th, and 26th.
Correct.
You couldn't have moved it up one weekend and kind of like done it on Easter just as a, a little bit of an FU.
Believe me, I thought about it. Oh my God. Yeah, that would be quite the irony. Maybe next year. So, and if people are interested in finding out about the conference, they can go to www.cort2020.com and they can purchase their tickets there and also rent their hotel room there because we're having it at a hotel. So I hope that people can make it. And of course, your listeners will receive a coupon code so they can have a discount on their tickets.
Yeah, I'll be putting that in the description, but it's DS036. And yeah, well, I mean, okay, is there any place where people can follow you on social media or the conference or anything like that? Or?
Sure, they can follow me on Twitter at Divorce Religion. And I'm also on Twitter as at wise_counselor. And counselor has 2 L's, being the good Canadian girl that I am. They can find me on Facebook as myself, Janice Selbie. And I'd love to hear from people.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. It was great talking to you. And
this was really fun.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for listening.
All right. Take care.